Welcome to the Insurance Wise Guys podcast. My name is Mike Lewis, insurance agency owner of Archbold & Lewis Insurance and your Insurance Wise Guy. On today's episode of Know, Like, and Trust, we have Ossian Police Chief Dave Rigney. Today I have someone that has devoted their life to helping others, someone that has made a career out of law enforcement and community service, and the occasional fishing trip. I am honored to call this man my friend. Everyone, let me introduce Ossian's Chief of Police, Dave Rigney. Dave, how's it going?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. I really am excited that you're here for sure, and I really hope some other people get a chance to know you like I do for sure. But let me talk first about fishing, because I hear you are quite the fisherman. Tell me, I know that you've fished everything from a puddle to an ocean. So tell me some of the biggest and the best stories there.
Oh, I guess my best fishing trips here as of the last 15 years or so better has been with the guys here in Wells County.
Yeah.
Who we travel up to Minnesota in every June and have our fishing trip up there. Fish for bass and mainly bass, but we catch all kinds of stuff up there. But it's a good time with some good people. So, yeah.
That's a group that's been going that way for quarter of a century, right?
That very close to that, yeah.
Yeah.
Very close. So yeah, there's some good guys. So
yeah,
we have a good time.
Minnesota, yeah. But you've been done some deep sea fishing too.
I've done some ocean fishing for shark and those kind of things. Again, with some of the same people.
Yeah. Okay.
So
all right.
It's we've got a kind of a group, so we have a good time.
You ever catch a shark?
I've caught several. I caught two, I think. So
really?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
both
something.
down in Florida. So yeah.
Yeah. What part of Florida?
Both of them been in the Keys.
Yeah. Clear down there then. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would love to be on that boat for sure. Okay, turn back the clock with me and talk to me about how your career began. I know you started in Ohio and then you left there for some schooling, but talk to me about where that started, where it took you, and how you landed in Ossian then.
Okay. From after college, I traveled to Texas and we lived there for a while, and I was doing full-time ministry stuff.
Mm-hmm. I
was a music and youth pastor there in Arlington, Texas for a while, and then I progressed from there and kind of went into a bivocational situation where I was in banking and still had my feet in ministry as well.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of worked my way through banking and wound up being a assistant branch manager and branch manager of bank. Then got into bank consulting.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably in the 80s. Traveled a lot. I would be gone all week. I would travel all over the eastern part of the United States, anything east of the Mississippi, doing projects for banks and savings and loans at the time, consulting type work, mainly in dollar cost savings, efficiency kind of things for the financial institutions. That kind of got old after about 4 or 5 years. I had 3 kids at the time.
Right.
So 3 boys, and they were all under school age when I started, and so it got to be a little bit taxing to be gone all the time. I really enjoyed the work, but it was just a little bit much to be gone. I would fly out on a Sunday night and fly back home on Friday night.
Gone all week.
Just tough. So I made some changes there. Took a job in California at a private Christian school teaching, being in the high school and junior high school administrator, and I also taught. While I was doing that, I met a guy who was my DARE instructor for my school, and he worked at Anaheim Police Department. That's where our school was, and he's a Christian guy, and we got along real well, became friends, and he encouraged me to check in and maybe being part of the Anaheim Police Department as a reserve for them. At the time, they were paying their reserves. So again, I always used the extra income. being in teaching. So I explored that, put myself through their academy out there, and I was hired on with them for a number of years before I decided that, hey, this is something I really enjoy doing. Anaheim was an awesome place to cut your teeth in law enforcement.
Yeah.
It's one of the premier law enforcement agencies out in Southern California. Top-notch equipment, facilities. They're one of the few departments that I've ever been exposed to and had the opportunity to work for that really didn't have a lot of common problems that most law enforcement agencies have as far as budget issues.
Yeah.
Because of Disneyland and all the peripherals that go along with that.
Because of the size of the area.
Their tax base and revenue base was pretty substantial, so they really did have the best of everything out there when it came to law enforcement. And so, but it was a good place to work and learn the law enforcement career, but kind of a catch-22. If it's a good place to do law enforcement, it's probably not a good place to raise a family.
I understand that.
It comes back to the family thing again.
Yeah.
So once my kids got to be in grade school and so forth, we had to make a decision about, is this where we want to spend our years and raise our kids here in this environment? I mean, I was out there when the Rodney King thing took off. And it was in the gangs and the drugs and stuff were just really bad at the time. And we just decided, well, we wanted to go someplace else. We liked Texas, so we went back to Texas. And I was working in a police department there in Rowlett, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas.
Okay.
For a while, and that's where my kids went to grade school, middle school, and high school. Finished up there. And I took my first chief's job in Texas. I think it was 2001, I believe it was. It all kind of blurs, but I think it was around 2001. Place in Venus, Texas. This is a southern area farm community out in the southern part of Dallas. So that was, again, a learning experience. I went into that position and learned rather quickly that I needed to know more.
Okay, that sounds fair.
So I went back to school at University of Cincinnati and got my master's degree in criminal justice because I thought I felt ill prepared for even where I was at then. But in 2003, my mom was diagnosed with colon cancer. And I had been away from the Cincinnati area for pretty much all my adult life, except for a small stint there when I was traveling so much, but I was still gone. So my kids were all out of the house. I was an empty nester family, and I felt some responsibility to maybe come back to the area and take care of my mom while she was going through this struggle. So I did. I came back and I finished up my education at UC in Cincinnati and got my master's. And then in 2005, I was hired here in Ossian as their chief of police. And I've been here since then. So kind of a quick rundown of my history. But
I agree with you for sure about being ill prepared. Sometimes you're always learning, and if you're not learning, it's time to hang it up and and be done for sure. Interesting that you talk about Anaheim and Dallas. That has to be far different policing than here in a small town. So talk to me about being an officer in a small town compared to somewhere like that would be in my eyes gang-ridden and drug-ridden. Not that we are exempt from that, but it definitely is different. Talk to me about that.
I think having the exposure of a big city like Anaheim and a medium-sized city where I was at in the Dallas area, it gives you a good foundation and background about law enforcement and what's required and what to keep your eye on. I mean, if most of these big cities, I learned that they don't have, and there are some exceptions. I think Anaheim might have been one of them, but they don't have the resources to focus on the minor things that create bigger things, bigger problems for law enforcement. So some of the minor thefts, like bicycle thefts or the minor vehicle, break-in vehicle thefts, that a lot of time they'll just go out and take a report and nothing's done. They just take some paper, they don't investigate, nothing gets done. And so those unsolved crimes become bigger issues because people are not held accountable or responsible for their actions. They don't get caught, they don't even get investigated. So those tend to escalate as things go down the road. And in smaller towns, we still have limited resources, but we have some time to stay focused on some of those minor issues that I think the public will consider minor, but in our small communities, they're still important.
They're important to that small community, yeah.
Right, and so we can give it some energy and some time and some resolution, hold some people accountable for the small things so they don't turn into the bigger things that tend to plague a lot of our communities.
You talk about being able to do that in a small community because you're not so focused on the large things, or they haven't become a problem yet. But I hear about defunding the police all the time, and I know it's hard to train for every situation out there, but when I hear about defunding the police, I think, gosh, you're going to put those officers in a position now where they're not prepared for those extra situations, and it puts them in a choice, and that's where maybe they could get in trouble. Defunding the police is not a way to go. So my question is, how do you feel about when you hear something that's being said as far as defunding the police, and do you think that ties directly into training for them to make the correct decision?
Yeah, defunding the police, like you alluded to, it's not the answer. It's not the solution. It's not even anywhere close to a solution for effective law enforcement. If anything, we need more resources, not less. We can always use more training, more exposure to things that we don't have on a regular basis. And given, without resources, without the ability to, and what defunding has done to most of the agencies that have gone through it, they've lost their specialized units, and to some even into their main body of law enforcement. But a lot of these bigger cities have defunded and got rid of their specialized units, which deal with specific crimes that plague that area. So when you can't do those, then those things they'll continue to grow and spiral, get out of control, and you lose that ability to have that kind of enforcement on those areas, and crime just escalates.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Even in a smaller community like that, because again, I know you were fortunate to see a lot of different areas of the country and how it starts, and there are others that aren't as fortunate as that to see that. And again, that's where I think training comes in. And if you don't have the dollars to train, you're just going to the wrong way. But that leads me into today's police departments, and not just our area, maybe even back to some of the larger areas. I see a lot of officers handcuffed in what they can do, and I'm mostly talking about the bigger cities, but I know that'll trickle down to us eventually. Do you think that this will cause people to not choose law enforcement as a career? And if you do you think their decision is justified either way, whether they do choose it or not? And I'm more concerned about when you start to defund and make those choices that much harder for an officer.
Well, the attitude I think that goes along with defunding the police is one that concerns me, because it's not only defunding the police, it's not supporting the police. I mean, you can't. That's the movement that it gave birth from, is we're not going to support the police, we're going to defund the police. we don't need the police. The police are a problem. The police are not a problem. I mean, do we have bad apples in our profession? Every profession does, and so does police. We're not exempt from that. But as a whole, do we do our best, I think, at trying to eliminate those people from our profession? I think we do. With all the initial stuff that we do in testing and everything else on the front end, but we can't predict every behavior that somebody may develop into. We do our initial screening, but again, people change, people grow, and they do things, they make decisions sometimes that are against the profession, as any profession. But to isolate police and say that because of a few, we want to punish the whole is never the correct answer.
Right.
So I think, but yeah, I think because of what we've gone through in the last couple of years, most recently, we've seen, even in Ossian, we had an open position for 2 years that we just can't fill. Not that I haven't had the opportunity to, but the people that are applying haven't met our standards.
I see.
And for whatever reason, I mean, we go through a rigorous whole background check and standards that we have to maintain, and testing and this and that, physical agility, as well as educational things we have to meet up to. We've had some borderline people that I could have made some exceptions to, but I chose to keep our standards. Now that has put us on a short schedule for us, and a lot of us have put in a lot of overtime just to keep things where we need them. But at the same time, we don't want to compromise either. So that's been my choice to make, and I think it's the right choice, because you don't want to start cutting corners and compromising your standards just to fill a position.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll wait for the right one.
Yeah. You talked about our community and how people view you and your officers too. It makes me wonder, I see a lot of the other areas out there, and how the people, how the public, how the community is treating the police is just ridiculous, in my opinion. You specifically in our area, I know that you and your department does a lot for the community. Do you think that community involvement and appearing more as a local person helps you almost stifle some things before they occur, and that people are viewing you more as a person than a badge number?
I think that's true. I mean, I think I'll have to say this: Wells County is unique. We have great public support here in Wells County for law enforcement, both on the city levels at Bluffton and the county, and Ossian, and even Markle and Zanesville, so forth. I mean, it's public is great. They support us. They back us. We get compliments and people speaking to us and complimenting us all the time, and supporting us with their even their gifts to us that they bring into the department sometimes. But it's amazing the support we get here in our community for law enforcement. And I think it's because again, here in Wells County, we have quality people in law enforcement, and not just law enforcement. I think in all areas of public safety, EMS and the fire departments, they're all. I mean, I rub shoulders with these people and you, and we have good quality people who care about our community, and they do a good job in what they do in the areas they serve in public safety. It's a great place to work and to be in that environment. To have that community support here is just awesome.
It is. So you're not planning on moving away then?
No.
Oh, good. Talk to me just a second about this year, particularly. COVID has been a big concern and on a lot of people's minds. Has that altered the way that you have to do your job, or has it put a hinder on that?
It's certainly been a challenge this year with COVID. Just the way you respond to calls, the way the calls are dispatched, even. If dispatch has now, they have a series of questions they ask usually on some calls that will let us know if anybody in the household is positive or possibly positive. And then they'll put that on the radio, which again gives us a heads up so we can prepare for that before we go into the scene, which is nice to know. I mean, sometimes you don't, but always we have to take the time to put in our protective equipment before we enter the scene. Now it's just another added thing we have to do to protect ourselves from COVID. It is an added burden. Not that we can't deal with it, but it's just something else we got to deal with. It's always on our mind. We want to stay safe. We want to be able to come to work and do our jobs and to keep the public safe. So if this were to sweep through the public safety community, then obviously that's an issue.
Absolutely.
So we have to try our best to keep ourselves protected and safe so we can be here for others.
Absolutely. I see that as a challenge too in all public safety. I mean, if you aren't protecting yourself, I mean, you're front line. And that's going to put a real burden on everyone else. So I mean, yeah. So I totally get that. Talk to me just a second about a story maybe you would have, maybe like the biggest case that you ever worked on, or maybe a biggest success. It doesn't even have to be in our community, but I know you've had a pretty extensive career there.
The one here locally that I think most people would remember was back in '06. We had I think the first homicide that Ossian had in 50, 60 years. And that was a challenge for us. Again, a small department, hadn't had one of those in our community for a very long time. So I had only been in office as a chief here for a year, so I took it, hey, this is something I got to really, this was, it was a watershed moment here. So we gotta take care of this. We gotta show the community that we're capable of dealing with these kind of issues here in Ossian. Even though they're rare, we have the ability and the talent to do this, which we proved that we did. I mean, that was a very difficult case to investigate and try to solve, because the suspect in that case was not a Ossian resident. He was out of Fort Wayne. He was homeless. We knew we had a suspect. We didn't know where he was or who he was. Didn't have a face. Didn't have a name. So it took us quite a bit of time just to identify who our guy was. And because he was homeless, after we were able to identify him, having the ability to locate him in Fort Wayne, again, being homeless was a challenge as well. I mean, I spent time, just like you see on TV, staked out in a vehicle, my personal vehicle, up in Fort Wayne, many nights with, pulling all-nighters almost with binoculars, looking at different places, trying to find a glimpse of my guy. And one afternoon, after my regular duty, I was up there and I spotted him coming out of an apartment built complex in Fort Wayne, and called Fort Wayne PD dispatch, and he got in the car with some others, and they stopped at a marathon station up there in Fort Wayne, and Fort Wayne PD swooped in and took custody of him, and then we got him transferred down here to Wells County. But, so that was a real victory. That
sure was. I remember that, and community coming together for something like that, and the way that you did solve that and get the guy, basically.
It was a good case. It took a lot of hours, and not without some help from Wells County Sheriff's Department. Diane Betts was instrumental in that investigation as well. We worked side by side with that investigation. She did a good job too. But so it was a joint effort. I can't take full credit, but we certainly did our part in making sure that we brought that one to a resolution.
Talk to me about tasers now. I mean, of course, you have a service weapon, but taser have you been instructed or trained that that's your first go-to?
In first go-to it's all circumstantial. I mean, if something is going to threaten an officer's life directly, then obviously that's not going to be our first choice. Our first choice is protect ourselves, so we'll make the right choice. If somebody, you don't take a taser to a gunfight,
understand,
or even a knife fight, really. So if you're presented with a life-threatening situation against yourself or somebody else, you have to make that decision. But typically, tasers is going to be used for intermediate weapon to somebody that is actively resisting, that wouldn't call for a deadly use of force. And it's a good option.
A good tool to have.
It's a good tool in your toolbox. And that's what it's about with law enforcement. We like to have all the options and different tools in our toolbox to protect people as well as ourselves. And this does both. Taser does both. I'm a Taser instructor, so I get to teach our officers in Taser use and training. And we got to do that every 2 years or every year. We got to recertify. But it's a good tool. Back in the day, when I was in Anaheim, they had police nunchucks.
No kidding.
We were trained on those. I mean, and they were really effective. You can do things with those that you can't do with, say, a baton or a PR-24. All you can do with those is just hit people. But with the nunchucks, you could manipulate those on somebody's arm or hand or wrist and actually apply some pressure, pain compliance, and get somebody out of a car, get somebody out of a stadium seat that's being unruly at a football game, baseball game, or whatever, or concert. So they were really good, but they didn't catch on big across the country, so they never really. But I still have them in my closet.
Now, had I known that, I would have had a set of nunchucks in here so you could have demonstrated. That is neat to me.
But yeah.
Have you had in the past 5 years even, have you had to tase someone on the job? On the job, and I'm not talking about training or...
myself, no. The department, yes.
Yeah, and you say that you are an instructor there, so each year your guys have to recertify in that. Do you have to get tased anymore?
No.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing.
Right. When we first got the tasers, Taser was strongly recommending that everybody that used or carried a taser get introduced to it in a live manner.
I've heard that.
They have since changed that. They still recommend it, but it's not a requirement. But personally, and through our department, we strongly encourage all of our officers to experience the taser firsthand, just so when it's deployed, they recognize what it does to somebody else,
to that individual,
and it's not going to be overused or abused. I can tell you, it's not a pleasant experience.
What does that?
Again, it's high voltage, low amperage. So I think the amperage is 0.001 something, but it's up to 50,000 volts. So it basically just it works on your central nervous system, and it basically locks your muscles up. It just locks when you get that in the voltage is going through. It just clamps your muscles up, and you can't move. If you got a good hit and a good position of it is scientific. It's based on probe placement. So if you got probes that are too close together and it doesn't work on the muscle groups like it should, then you won't get it as effective as a outcome. You might get, like, the back muscles may tense up, but their arms and legs still may be able to be used. So you want to get a good spread that will affect more muscle groups, and then when it does that, it gets the whole body locked up.
Now, is that only affects them while it's being triggered or activated?
And Taser makes, they make tasers for personal use as well as for law enforcement, mainly law enforcement, but they also make taser for personal use. You could buy one if you want. The difference
I do want one.
The difference is ours stop at 5 seconds.
Okay.
So we got a 5 second charge that somebody's going to get, and what that does, it gives us time to control them and then try to get them handcuffed, because you can't handcuff while somebody is receiving the current. And then that's our goal, is just get them controlled.
Just to subdue them. And
the personal use tasers, their timer is 30 seconds. I can tell you, if you get tased for 30 seconds, you're not going to feel like getting up and doing much of anything to anybody. But the goal for personally is for you to disable somebody and you to be able to retreat.
To get away.
To get away from that threat. Ours is to take somebody into custody. So that's the difference between law enforcement and the personal side use of Taser. But it is effective. You get a good spread and a good hit on somebody, you're going to incapacitate them, and you'll be able to take them into custody without yourself getting hurt or them getting hurt. As soon as the shock is over, you feel like you've had a good workout. And it is exhausting to get tased. It just feels like it just drains you.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine what a 30-second time on that one would put you into. You certainly wouldn't want to get up and take off running or hurt anybody at that point, because I know just a 5-second ride with a taser is enough to make you take a breath. So.
Yeah. Well, that's about all the questions I had for you. And normally at this time, I let you take a moment to say anything else you wanted to the community, or to tell people how to get a hold of you. I'm going to say people can call 911 to get a hold of you.
They can call our department number too, but yeah, feel free. And I just appreciate the time and opportunity to talk. I thank you for your opportunity to do that.
I appreciate it too. So stay out of trouble. Don't get tased. Dave Rigney, Ossian, Chief of Police. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, you ready? David Taser.
Bring it. Breathe. Oh, he did get in the butt cheek. Yeah.